Here's an aerial view of Brunswick and Topsham, and you've got the Cabot Mill there in the middle, and over to the left you have what was the paper company building. And the Cabot Mill became sort of best known in Brunswick, and the letter C is for Cabot and corn, and also for Comee. This is Comee, not quite spelled properly, but the Comees, if you go if you go to the Pine Grove Cemetery in Brunswick, there's a corner sort of at the southeast, is that right, southeast corner? Yeah, there's this Jordan and Larkin D. Snow tomb there in the corner. Well, not far from that, you will find this, the Comee marker. And so that is, we're going to speak about briefly here. So Edgar Randolph Comee was from Massachusetts, and he lived between 1893 and 1968. He was a Mason, and he was married to Constance, who lived in 1894 to 1970. Here's a picture of her when she was young, and as she grew older, she looked like that, and that, and that, and they became the parents of a number of children, including Edgar A. Comee, Edgar Atherton Comee. And Edgar A. Comee was interviewed before he passed away and was asked about his family history, and he said his family all came from Saugus, Massachusetts, which is sort of true. His mother was definitely from Saugus, Massachusetts. I'm not sure where this was taken. This is a great early photograph of the couple. But what's that? It's a neat car. It's a neat building. It's a great picture. Here's another picture of it.
That's the one Mom always had in her closet. Always had.
So, in this one. But what we do know is that she, Constance Atherton Comee, was born in Saugus. And she was the daughter of a fellow named Horace Atherton, who was also from Saugus. And not only was Horace Atherton from Saugus, but he wrote a history book about Saugus. So there were deep Saugus roots. And when she decided to marry Edgar Randolph, they got married in Saugus in 1916. So that's Connie in a nutshell. Here's another early picture that shows Edgar Randolph on the far right. He was a catcher for a baseball team in Brunswick, the Cabot baseball team, in the 1918. So you've got him getting married in Saugus, Mass. in 1916, and he's up in Brunswick by 1918. And this is Horace, his father-in-law, who was the Saugus historian who wrote the history of Saugus, Massachusetts, which is kind of cool. And then we also found, when you look at the family, the Comees, you kind of go back a few generations, have towns, T-O-W-N-E, in their chart, and the towns that they descend from are descended from a brother of Rebecca Town Nurse, who was one of the famed witches hanged at Salem in 1692. So if you read my book, Salem Witch House, which I wrote in 2009, we talk about all those accused people in the mistrials of justice. But before we go off on the Salem tangents, I want to show this guy. He never gets attention. This is Albert Ruger. He was a draftsman, and he produced these amazing perspective views of cities and towns all across the country, like this one, for example, which I forget where it is. It's out west. Anyway, he does these bird's eye views. What's that?
What's his connection?
Oh, because I'm going to get you into Brunswick now through a Ruger map. So he also did the whole picture here of Winnegans, tide mills near where I grew up. He does these beautiful aerial views. And this is the one he produced in Brunswick in the 1870s, Brunswick and Topsham. And if you zoom in on that, you get a really good view. This was the Brunswick that the Comees moved to in the 19-teens. And they originally occupied a house somewhere on Federal Street near the Bank Street intersection, where there's like a lumberyard shown in this picture. But we know they also had connections to the paper mill. And the paper mill here is shown here as item K on the bird's eye view. And this paper mill was originally the Bowden Paper Company, and it later became the Pajevsky Paper Company. And Edgar Randolph Comee attended college at Tufts in Medford, Massachusetts, and got an engineering degree there, and was very quickly promoted to a series of engineering positions with this mill, which produced paper using water power. Here's another photograph of this mill, probably about the turn of the century. And what I like about the bird's eye view and also this photograph is, look at the cupolas. It's kind of cool cupolas. These are not straight roofed cupolas. These are like this one. If you go up 123 in Harpswell to where the Marikonig farm is, the Schofield property up there by the carrying place, this is the cupola on that Marikonig farm. The Schofields use the same detail here, this curved rafter roof, which is gorgeous and really agrees with the Italianate style of the cupola. So they use that on this paper mill in the early days, which is kind of fun. And that paper mill was taking in logs like this, which it would grind up for pulp, and used water power from the Androscoggin to turn water wheels and to turn machines. And early on, here you go, this is 1917 to 18, this is right after he's finished at Tufts. Edgar Comee is. Edgar R, married to Constance, he's an assistant civil engineer with the Pajevsky Paper Company, which took over Bowdoin Paper, and he lives at 18 Federal Street. And his parents, the older generation, is living with them, is boarding with them at 18 Federal. Now, I don't know where 18 Federal Street is anymore. It probably got knocked down for a parking lot. This is like the, this is one of the law offices, and I think it's like number 20 or something. So there's a parking lot where you'd expect 18 to be. Yeah, so that's not going to work. So the building isn't there anymore, so that's hard to say what it looked like. But we do know that Edgar Randolph, not long after that, and his wife, Constance Atherton Comee, she acquired a building up on South Street, which is kind of up on the south side of Bowdoin College. And this is the legal description of the property they bought, which became known as 4 South Street. And you can see it's described as being next to a land, it was the same land that was conveyed to this person, Clarence Colby, who was a junior partner of this architectural firm. Clarence Colby sold it to the Comees in the 19-teens, and he got the land from Joshua Chamberlain, which is kind of fun. But anyway, this was 1919. That deed was signed, sealed, and delivered. And so the Comees moved from 18 Federal Street, it would seem, to this number 4 South Street, which today is used as some kind of a child support office building, I guess, for Bowdoin College. And there's a children's center right nearby. So that's kind of fun. Yeah, children's center, preschool, kindergarten program. And then, and so here's the town directory for Brunswick, showing again that they own that building at 4 South. And again, he's got some elder generation of family living with him there as well. Now, Edgar Randolph was also known apparently as a Universalist, as a prominent theologian and a church leader. So he gets a write-up in Rockland, Maine. He was listed as a leader. So he was quite influential, I would say, all over the state, and a lot more could be researched about him. This is a great picture of her, though, Constance, and I assume that's got to be the younger Edgar as a great picture. Look at the ears.
What year was Edgar born?
He was born in, I think, was it 17? I think it was.
Yeah, yes.
So this,
Alice was born in 19.
okay, I think 17. And so this is probably, within a year of that. I mean, what a great expression, what a fantastic photo. Okay, here's a later family photo. Here's Edgar A on the far left. So the face hasn't changed that much, No. And it's a great picture. Now you got Edgar and Constance in the middle. And I guess most of you know the rest of who you all are here. But you got Jack Baxter over here on the far right. And you've got Dora, right? Who, and it just kind of goes on down from there. So it's a great shot. When I first saw this, I thought maybe those columns in the setting was taken in one of these office buildings. The paper company had a office buildings like that. But no, I think now that was taken in 33 Federal Street. Because 33 Federal turns out has the same column. So here's a picture of Connie taken recently in front of the ancestral factory. Great picture, by the way. I like it. Wonderful. And did you take this, Andrew?
No, that's a selfie.
That's a selfie? I don't see her arm. I don't think it's a selfie.
It is.
She's good at it.
She's very good at that. Yeah. Now this was the family shot, though, that got us all excited at first. I think it's a beautiful photograph here. So you got Edgar Randolph and Connie on the right, and then you've got Edgar Atherton in the middle, and his 2 sisters, Alice on the far left, who marries Jack Baxter, and the other sister who's named Connie also, right, after her mother. And
She often went by Betty back then. Yes.
the younger Connie did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I guess the middle name Elizabeth.
Oh, okay. To distinguish from the other Constance, probably. Too many, yeah. And this is a neat, I blew this one up. This is a great one of Edgar R in his later years.
That's what I remember.
Isn't that a great expression, too? He just, wonderful.
Looks like a president.
Yeah. Okay, so Edgar A, the eldest son, was born in 1917. And he lived at a variety of Federal Street addresses, too.
He lived at 17 for a while.
Which one?
17.
Yes, that's right. We've got pictures of 17 that Liz took for us, and we'll show that in a minute. This is Edgar R. in the 1960s being involved with some town planning, a member of the Brunswick Planning Board. meeting with the Maine Central Railroad person in front of the old municipal building. So there you go. So the family's involved in the management of Brunswick and the care of Brunswick. And what this little slideshow started out to be 15 minutes long was to shine, originally I just wanted to shine some light on Edgar A, because I had never heard his name before. And he lived between 1917 and 2005. And he was an artist and a teacher and a military man and a brother-in-law of the Baxters. And here he is. This is his college graduation picture, another college picture, not a very good one. And he was a member of the Glee Club at Tufts. And he is visible in one of these men here. I'm trying to remember which one he is. But, oh, he's in the middle, on the front, right down and right there.
Yeah.
Hard to miss it. Just saying.
And here he is. He goes to become a military man. And here he is in later years.
That is just typical.
Yeah.
That's so
See, you guys knew him. I never met him. I only met him through this, the Brunswick flying can. And I just tell you, when I see this, it's like, whoever did that's got artistic skill. That's pretty sophisticated, I think. It's a very good axonometric drawing. It's not a perspective, it's an axonometric drawing. It's just beautifully done. So this was, the county picture. And in American history, I think the only other artist you could find that did a lot with tin cans was Andy Warhol. So he was not the only one. I think Steve Edner did with this one too. But Andy Warhol was the best known tin can artist. But we know that Edgar A. went to elementary school at this building on Bath Street, which before Bowdoin got it, it was a school building way back. Then he went to an earlier Brunswick High, not this one, because this one wasn't built till like 1936, but he graduated from a slightly earlier Brunswick High that was on Federal Street. Then, as we've been told, he did live at 17 Federal Street. He boarded there initially. And here's 17 Federal Street, which is a nice federal building with Italian bay windows. At college, he was involved with a lot of things. You can see all these activities. And it lists in his yearbook that he lived at 17 Federal Street when he attended Tufts, which is right here, which is not far north of Boston. And he graduated in 38. And he talks about his education in that interview that was done in the early 2000s. But I like the art he did. And Liz showed me some wonderful sketches he did in some college notebooks. So I photographed those. He got this little great picture of probably himself playing the piano. He was very musical, apparently. And, that's a good drawing. It's a good cartoon drawing of what was a classic sort of Victorian piano stool there, an upright piano. And by the 1920s, they were using these for pens. And with a pen much like that, he produced drawings like this, which are quite nice.
I gave him. Oh, okay.
So she let me photograph these now, and then you'll start seeing that he clearly either traveled somewhere or he went to movies to get some ideas. He got wanderlust when he was in his college years, so he starts drawing things like this. This is classical ruins. Pretty good presentation of what's probably a Roman ruin in Europe somewhere. And if you look at the real photographs of these things, similar ruins, you can see he's got everything that you need there, really. He's got the fluting, he's got the bass, he's got the proportions, he's got the architrave, he's got the scale of the thing, and it's phenomenal. So that was not seen in New England, I can tell you that. And but he drew it, and he did a good drawing of it. And he's also shown how these columns were built with drums. They were carved as separate pieces of big drums that would then be laid up and they'd be pinned together. You see the little hole he's got in the middle of the end of one drum there. So he's got his details. He knows how the Greeks built things and the Romans built things, and he's done a good job. This one is also an interesting one. This is a drawing clearly from the American Southwest, or inspired by it, because out in like New Mexico and places like that, you've got adobe construction, and the Indians and the Spanish both did this thing with the overhanging logs that stick out, and they actually are a structural support for a roof or a floor above, and it's called a viga in that Spanish construction. And in the early 1920s and 30s, there was nationally a revival in Spanish Pueblo-style architecture. So he's doing that in the 20s and 30s. Now, I threw these pictures in because what he's doing in a lot of these drawings is what we architects would call an elevation drawing. And an elevation drawing means you're just drawing exactly the way it would look if everything was flat and you're looking at it straight on. So he knows how to do that, and he can do that with measuring things by scale on a piece of notebook paper. Then he starts the thing of, well, if I drop a little vanishing point in there, and connect some lines, I can get a one-point perspective drawing, and that's what he starts doing like this. So this is a very simple drawing that he produced of probably a connected New England farmhouse here in Maine. And it's a good drawing, and it's done very simply with elevations and some connecting lines towards a single vanishing point. So it's pretty sophisticated. And it could be, there's a lot of houses around there today that still look like that. If you go down to Neal's Point Road, this you'll see on the north side of that road. It's a similar, connected Maine farmhouse, big house, little house, back house, barn kind of a thing. And that's what he's got going on here too. So, and there's a whole book written about those kind of buildings. And in Federal Street, Brunswick, you've got these hip roof federal buildings. Now he does like to include outhouses for some reason. He really gets into outhouses. But he's done a pretty good drawing there. And oh yeah, I included if you go to the Grovestown School these days, as I did last week or so, I took this picture. Behind it, you'll see these little outhouses have been replicated. So I don't know of any other place in Brunswick you can go to see period outhouses. But clearly this is a subject of intense interest by Edgar A, because he drew this in his notebook as well. He drew this great little perspective drawing or axonometric drawing of an outhouse. And hanging in the middle of it, on one wall is the Sears, Roebuck and Company catalog. So you have an endless supply of toilet paper that you might want. So plumbing was sort of a new thing in the early 20th century. This is a quote that Deborah had made about her father loving the sea, and he was a prankster, and that's pretty, that's a good one. We know that a lot of the Brunswick buildings were modeled after federal period buildings in Salem, Massachusetts. Okay, so Samuel Melcher from Brunswick would walk to Salem and he'd sketch these drawings that were seen down there. So what does Edgar A. Comee do? He draws doorways like this, which have Salem urns on the top and are very fancy. And about the time Bowdoin starts doing these things with their, entry gates, looking pretty formal and sophisticated, Edgar A. Comee does this beautiful little drawing showing a gussied up entrance to a college campus, which is pretty nice, And then by the 30s, you also started getting the Art Deco style that was really popular, and that had this whole ziggurat thing going on with stepped masses. And he does sort of an Art Deco, I call it the Comee concealed lettering style, which you can see in a minute what I'm talking about here. This is one of his drawings right here. And at first, when you see what this is, you can't even tell what it is, because it's hard to read down here what he wrote. But you get used to that lettering style, you see what he's doing. He's stretching the letters out and making them look blocky. It says, "Ye future Biffy." Ye future Biffy. So, ye meaning like colonial and historical. This is going to be a future Biffy. This is an outhouse design that he's designed for a future year, but it's all in Art Deco style, and it's got a dome on top. It's pretty amazing. I've never seen an outhouse like that in my life. And a Biffy is a toilet or outhouse. I didn't know that until we ran across this drawing. So that's kind of fun. And you look at this, what's going on architecturally, it's like a ziggurat. It's all these piled up stages. There's another one he did, probably also an outhouse. Isn't that kind of cool? This could also, forget the outhouse business for a second. You want to do tiny houses?
Yeah.
Why don't we do concentric telescoping tiny houses from these drawings? Nobody's done that that I know of. And yet, they all kind of evolve out of these older Egyptian models. He did this nice little drawing of it's a still life, and he's got the reflection in on the glass, which is nice. He did this little sketch. Now this one, I could read, I think, as a date of 1938 on the top, and then he talks about Portland, and he writes Wilkie. So I was thinking, Wilkie, I've heard that name before. And it turns out in the 30s, this Wendell Wilkie was a very well-known politician. And here's a portrait of him on the cover of Time magazine. And we go back to the drawing that he just drew. It could be his cartoon drawing of Wilkie. I'm not sure. And this picture, which shows up, I think could be actually a self-portrait, because here's a photograph of him on his wedding day. It's not that different, So he was a good artist. And here's a picture of him also on the far right in his college days. And he was at this particular Zeta Phi fraternity house. I'm sorry, Zeta Psi fraternity house. And he did all these letterings about Zeta Psi in different, he tries the block style. He's practicing lettering, and he's having a fun time with it while he's living in that building. He's right near the campus. And these are his Zeta Psi classmates, and he's the next to the last one in the front row on the right.
Yeah.
Doesn't look too happy there though. I don't know.
Oh,
Not too
you
happy. No, not a good day. But you got to remember, photographs only show how you look at a 1/100th of a second. So it's a frozen moment in time. The other thing we know he really did while he was at Tufts was he got involved in sailing. He loved to sail, and there was a sailing club there. And he also does this sketch on a notebook paper. And this probably shows a friendship sloop, is my guess.
Yep.
And here's a friendship sloop. They have a uniquely curved bow and a major sail, and it's a very simple rig, but it's beautiful. And it's Maine. And I think that's about it. We also know he did some reporting for the Tufts Weekly, and he was voted to be, what did we find out? He was voted to be, here we go, the wittiest classmate of his class. So that's kind of cool.
Oh, great, thank you.
And so I guess that's it. We've also got his wife here.
Mommy.
We'll go through briefly. She was a sweetheart, apparently, loved by everybody. This was the self-written obituary that Edgar had for himself, and he talks about being a member of the reasonably loyal order of Neo-Silurians, which it turns out is totally made up. It's a fabricated group, but he's making fun of the moose, who are loyal, and his are the reasonably loyal group, so there you go. Anyway, another couple of drawings there, and there, and there, and there. He did ships, he had a maritime interest. He ends up going into the Navy, which is not surprising, and he becomes a captain in the Navy. He commands a minesweeper, he marches in a parade, he comes back, he takes a second wife, and then the first wife marries Richard Jordan, and they do a lot of good at the community level. There is I guess a room named for them in Brunswick. That's a sweetheart of a picture. Isn't that a great picture? That's a great picture. So, and that's kind of basically where we are. I think, oh yeah, I was finding, this was funny, small world. I was finding that Edgar A. Comee and his second wife had bought a property on Orr's Island that had been earlier owned by Larry Hall and Marcia Hall. Well, Marcia Hall was actually my wife's aunt for a while, so it's a small world when you get on the islands.
Especially in Maine.
Especially in Maine. And this picture I threw in just to show what a 35-foot catch looked like, and I'm told he had a 35-foot catch. But I think, Liz, is that picture, that is the best, in the other room there, is the one he's got. So I think that I've used up my 15 minutes, but that's basically Comee's and the houses they lived in at the end. He did some cartoon type stuff too. This is a great family picture. 1619 rock, I mean Plymouth they have 1620 rock. We had a 1619 rock here, who knew? And I think this was the last house he lived in Brunswick, right off of Upper Main Street on Mere Point Road. And he had again this watercolor talent and drawing. He did beautiful. This picture of the Halfway Rock Lighthouse is incredible, and the tin can is just a stunning one. So, and it's also kind of like, you know, Dolly does these surreal frozen flying things like cats and water and stuff. So he was in the tradition there. And I guess that's it. We want to remember all 4 generations of Baxters, and we also want to remember the Comees. And here's where here's Jack Baxter holding up that tin can. So that's it. Thank you very, very much. So Liz is thinking of, you're going to do a booklet of some sort? You're thinking maybe? So we've got a lot of great visuals that are coming together, and I think they ought to be, well, you've recorded this now, right? So you can
Yep.
replay this.